yoga on that episode. Hello and welcome to Fresh Perspectives. My name is Gail, and my guest for the day is a man that some of you, maybe a lot of you, are going to recognize, and he's been on Fresh Perspectives a couple of times before. He's a mental health professional, and his name is Marshall Greenstein. Thank you for coming on again, Marshall.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for having me.
You can tell by Marshall's hair getting a little on the long side and his big beard that we're in the midst of the COVID-19 problem here still.
Yeah.
And with all of the barber shops and everything closed up still. Although they're talking about opening things up pretty soon. Last weekend the interview I did. It was on the Mother's Day weekend, and it was snowing, and I was sitting here bundled up in 2 layers of clothing to do the interview. So anyways, I've invited you here today, of course, to talk about how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting people, and looking for some ideas for things that can help people. So have you been able to counsel your clients during the pandemic, since so many places are closed?
Well, I have, and in a humble way of thinking about it, I was speaking to my own physician who had gone in just for a regular appointment, and he said, oh, by the way, what you do is essential, like me. And I said, how is that? He said, anything under the auspices or under the heading of health, including mental health, is considered to be essential. I said, oh, okay. So I've kept my office open, and I've got some people who've come in. We wear a mask. Some don't. I've done a pretty good cleaning of my office, and some people call. I have people who have chosen not to come in at all because they have a comorbid medical problem, diabetes, leukemia, things of that nature. And I have them justifiably anxious about leaving their home, never mind coming for a mental health appointment. And some of the people don't even want to call, so that's just...
So have you done some of your counseling over the phone? Or?
I've done quite a bit over the phone, and it makes it it's certainly very different. It changes the tone and kind of the perspective, because I'm unable to see my client's unable to see me. So I really have to go a lot on their tone, their volume, and such, and do the best we can, because that's what they continue to want that, and continue not to want to come in because they don't want to be exposed. Many are self-quarantining, and they're very they're working at home, or maybe they've lost their job, or maybe their job's on hold. An assortment of...
Yeah. Well, you know, as far as this television program is concerned, I'm thinking it wouldn't work if we were sitting here. Well, we've got this big table between us, you know.
Yes.
But I don't think it would work to wear the masks in here, because doing the interviews, because it would probably muffle our voices, and we want the viewing audience to be able to hear what we're saying, you know.
Sure.
So, anyways, do you find then that a large percentage of people that you talk to are really very scared at this point in time?
I think they are, and I think a lot more people are wanting to talk about it rather than just talking about before it even existed in their mind, to talk about whatever it was that brought them in, whatever was their presenting problem, family problem, relationship problem, depression, anxiety, a host of other problems. This is something that I think has become critical for people to talk about. Even my professional journals are talking about how nationally, maybe even internationally, mental health providers are being encouraged to have their clients talk about these things, talk about subjects, matters of importance, as sensitive and delicate as it is. It's critical not to have people keep that in and withdraw and isolate, because it's enough to self-quarantine for many people anyways. At least to have someone, be it in person, over the phone, to talk to, it helps them a little bit, I'm sure, as they tell me.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you're able to help them. Now, how is it affecting people? How is it affecting people who have a germ phobia? I mean, there are people who already have a germ phobia, and I mean, this has got to be blowing their minds away.
Well, I dare say that I'm kind of chuckling to myself, because I don't think I've had a client who has spoken about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I certainly have clients who are very health conscious, neat conscious. They wash their hands anyways,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. But why I'm giggling to myself is because our president, Trump, apparently calls himself a self-proclaimed germaphobe. So I wonder what's going on for him. But the thing, because he doesn't want anybody to touch him, yet oddly enough, and who knows, I don't want to get into too much of a controversy over him, but for someone who's a self-proclaimed germaphobe, he seems to surround himself with people very close to him. Maybe not actually touching him, but they're close enough. Germs do jump around, we're learning from the COVID virus situation, but I've not had anybody who's also proclaimed themselves to be, have a phobia or anything about germs.
I just figured, it would be a lot worse for somebody who had that kind of a phobia, because you hear about certain people, like even some celebrities have admitted that they have a problem. They normally won't shake hands with people or anything.
Oh yeah.
So
well, and of course this has changed remarkably, where people who ordinarily, and I think one big matter of that stands out, people who are like myself. I'm a hugger, I'm a handshaker, all of that. Now, it's rare that I'm just one person and nobody wants to shake my hand. So we do the, elbow thing, and people do kind of laugh.
Yeah, I don't even do that.
But they're doing things. But I think
seems kind of silly. But you can just wave. But
I think in ordinary, in customary, intimate settings where people are sitting down and visiting, where maybe they would have had coffee or lunch together and give each other a hug, greeting.
They're not doing that.
They're not doing that.
Yeah, I've had the experience of running into some of my friends in the grocery store and having them keeping their distance from me, like it used to be kind of a joke years ago, if people didn't really want to associate with you, you'd crack a joke about they act like they think I have the plague, or something like that. Nowadays it's gotten to where even people who would like to hang around with you don't want to, so.
But I think that's a shift. That's one of many, many shifts of how people who are, even sneezing, people who are sneezing, I watched my grandson this morning sneeze, and, so he's only 5, but he's already learned how to sneeze into his, his elbow and keep it away, and, go wash your hands, that type of thing. You have to kind of coax them to do that, but those are changes. I think we're learning actually to wash our hands more than we ever thought about doing it.
Right. Well, let's see. How about people who already have a fear of leaving their houses?
agoraphobia.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going on with that. I think we're having to. It's an excellent question. I have not. Again, I don't have currently any clients who have agoraphobia. All my clients are able to come out. But I think in general, for people who have that, this has to be a more complicated for them. I think what we're seeing for people for a lot of people, I'm hearing a lot for elderly or for people who are sickly, some medical problem. A lot of people are not leaving their house at all. I have a client out of Pennsylvania, talks about her mother-in-law who lives in New York State, and she said she's not left her home in 3 months. Not at all. Doesn't do anything more than open the door to receive packages of
groceries,
medication, right, or groceries. That neighbors who are very lovely and kind, which is a beautiful thing. How many people are coming forth to be helpful for during this time. But that's one example of, I'm sure, many that I've read about, people who refuse to leave their home. And not at all. So they're not even going in the car for a drive or going for a walk. And I'm not sure how much of it may be related to an already pre-existing, panic or agoraphobia problem. But they're isolating, and they're isolating more. And many of these people are single. They may be widows or widowers. They may be people who are just haven't had, who ordinarily might come out and visit with people. They may be in clubs or organizations, get together and do things. Let's go out to lunch, kind of thing, and they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And I worry about those people. When I hear my client talk about her mother-in-law, I hear worry in her voice because she knows that she can't even go and see her. So she speaks to her on the phone, and for some people, that
it's
is the best they can do.
It's like people who are patients in hospitals and nursing homes and things can't go to visit their loved ones in those places. So yeah, I mean, you can't even have a funeral now for a loved one who passes away because they can't have a bunch of people coming into the funeral home and so forth. You can't. They're not having church services.
And what that is doing, as we're beginning to realize, is it's enough to have what we might call a uncomplicated or complicated kind of grief reaction when we have a loved one who passes away from just ordinary circumstances. Depressing as it may be, this is an unknown, and so, like you say, people are not able to have funerals, or they're not able to go and depending on people's religious persuasion, being able to go to a wake, we'll say, or go to somebody's home and have a meal afterwards, after a funeral. And it's complicating matters because people weren't even able to go to the hospital. I know I was touched to tears a couple of weeks ago when I was watching a program on TV, and they were a news program, and they were interviewing a physician who said he was in tears, saying the worst part of his day is realizing how many people who ordinarily might be coming into a hospital setting, when they know that their loved one is sickly and maybe ready to pass, where they can hold their hand, where there's a last-minute touch, where there's a last-minute word of love, of affection, of remembrance. And you can't do that. You can't do that. I have a family member who's at a nursing home, and the best they can do is some kind of a conference call or a Zoom or something like that to have any occasional contact. But with people who are sickly, there's nobody. And the man was saying, ordinarily, we just say we have a goodbye, and it makes it a little bit less than complicated for some. Now we can't even grieve in ways that we used to, so people are having to find new ways to grieve, and it makes it very difficult when you feel like you're helpless. You can't. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. for right now.
Yeah, yeah. Does having to wear a mask in public make some people feel claustrophobic?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. I know there are people who are wearing masks. For example, I have somebody I know quite well who wears a mask in a job he has, and he says, and it's warm where he is, and he says at the end of the day, he just feels so much eye pressure and everything else because he's not able to take it off for a moment during the day. And I think for a lot of people it's very difficult. And I think unfortunately it's brought up a source of great controversy because there are some people who refuse to wear, whether it's in supermarkets or places that may be open, or walking up and down the street. I've seen people walking into supermarkets with 3 or 4 kids in tow, and they're all wearing masks. And I've seen other people walking in and not wearing anything.
I haven't been seeing very many children in the grocery store since it's got started myself.
Yeah, I have. I've only seen a few myself, but I think some people might not have a choice when they're able to go out and go shopping.
Right, right.
Yeah, and that's another one of the many complications of this whole COVID virus is that people who might be working and having daycare, the daycare centers may not be able to take people. Kids, because they don't want them all mixed together and by chance, blowing their nose and whatnot. They don't know what to do. For hygiene's sakes, there's many that are shutting down or minimizing the number of kids that they can see, or people may not have a job right now and afford to even pay for their children, so they have to take them if they go to the supermarket or wherever they might take them.
Yeah, I do know that when I'm wearing one, I know I'm getting air, but it feels kind of like secondhand air or something. It's both your mouth and nose are covered, and there's no air holes in them or anything. The area is just completely covered. And I find myself when I'm out in public pulling it away often, so I can get a breath of air, that's not all, it's hard to explain what I mean, but it's, I don't see that we're keeping our bodies oxygenated really good when we're wearing one. Like the people in the grocery store have to have them on throughout their entire shift.
That's right, yeah.
And this one woman that was stocking shelves when I walked past her one day commented to me something about it's really hard to breathe in these things. And I said, yeah, I don't know how you stand it for an entire shift. And she goes, oh, I'm just glad I'm not a nurse.
Yeah. Well, and all the people that have to wear them, be they medical or non-medical, it is different. I mean, nurses and doctors are used to wearing them because they have to in many settings, but they don't have to in all.
Like when they're performing surgeries and
right,
things.
or if they're going into a room where maybe it's an intensive care unit or emergency room, and it's critical for them to do it. Same thing with dentists nowadays. I mean,
Well, they aren't even open.
That's right, yeah.
I guess you can't see a dentist unless you have an emergency dental situation.
That's right. That's my understanding, right. So yeah, and it complicates things. Obviously, all jokes aside, while the dentist or the hygienist is wearing a mask, the patient can't wear a mask, obviously.
No, they can't, can they?
Yeah, that's right. And I know when I work, I have a volunteer job that I'm involved with, and even for 4 or 5 hours, where the place I work, I volunteer for, mandates everybody wearing a mask. In fact, wearing rubber, gloves, and doing kind of dirty jobs that we're doing. But with, stay clean. But oftentimes the person I work with and me, both of us complain about it being too hot, even if it's not hot out. But it's just warm. It just feels, like you said, we don't feel like we're getting good air. And when we might step outside for a moment of respite, it helps a little bit. But
yeah, because like in yoga and like that, you're talking about keeping your body oxygenated. They say that like cancer patients should get at least half an hour of exercise every day because it helps to keep their bodies oxygenated, it seems like cancer cells have a hard time replicating in an oxygen-rich environment. So,
Okay.
And I've been joking with people saying if we're still having to wear these masks and when the weather gets in the 80s and 90s, we're going to smother,
That's right. That's right. It's going to be tough
Yeah,
for a lot of
yeah,
people. And it depends
yeah.
what jobs are allowed to be open, and be they construction, even people in construction, depends on the job and the place, might be having to wear a mask. Doing drywall, some people don't, but many do. And that's going to be complicated even if the construction places are open.
Yeah, some of them are not.
Yeah.
So anyway, the people who have these problems that we've been talking about, these particular mental health issues, what can be done to help them deal with it? Do you have suggestions for things that people can do for themselves?
I think there are lots of suggestions. A lot have been already published, spoken, but I think when it comes from day to day, I think for an individual, single people can exercise. I see people going out as individuals, walking, biking, running. I think, as you said moments ago, getting some fresh air, getting away from your own home, I think it's a good idea. I think it's, for people, this is a little sensitive, but I think for people who are smokers, especially, I think it's a good idea to make sure that you do, if you're going to smoke outside and not allow your family to get secondhand smoke. I think it's important for people to stay away from things that sometimes might complicate health, but is unfortunately on the rise, both alcohol use, serious drug use and such. So I'm not sure the answer for that, other than for people to recognize that if they have a problem, that they need to get some help. I think getting exercise in the home, outside the home, I think sounds to me like it's safe. That's important. I think eating well, as it would be anytime. I think eating a good diet. I think what's going on too is a lot of people I'm hearing and understanding are trying different things as far as diet, new recipes, new ways of eating. Maybe eating less of something that they ate before, more of something, learning to drink more water. And those who have young children or even older children in the house, getting them to be more of a part of the home and a family, doing things together, whether it's watching movies or doing puzzles, playing cards, whatnot. Unfortunately, one of the problems I'm hearing too, I just heard a great interview, because a lot of kids are home from school, many kids are on the computer or watching TV a lot. So I think for that, I think it's a control matter. I think when mom or dad are busy trying to make meals while the young kids are running around, how do you take care of them without putting them in front of a monitor of some kind?
Especially if the parents are working from home.
That's right.
So they have to put in their time on the job even though they're home.
That's right, and that's been a stressor for a lot of people learning that shift to be at home, because they're trying to figure out, how do I utilize the space that they have to create an office, for example, when ordinarily they may not do anything more than just have a spot, maybe at a little desk, to write out their daily or weekly or monthly bills and such. Now they're having to be serious, keep the kids away from that. I saw a interview the other day with somebody who was on Zoom, and the guy had while he was being interviewed, he had a little puppy dog in the background, and they were talking about that, but he was laughing, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry," and they said, "Well, don't, it was great. It shows how real you are." But he had to shift and find something, whether it was maybe in his basement, when maybe he didn't use his basement for anything except for storage. And I think that's a very important factor, because I think we don't know yet what the future holds for, even when we're allowed, when the scientists, when the doctors, when the epidemiologists say, "Hey, I think the data shows that more people can return to work," I think there's a push for a lot of people to remain working at home. But again, that's going to shift what they ordinarily, customarily did, as far as what do you do with the kids? Do you put them, with grandma and grandpa? Do you put them in somebody's daycare? Do you stay at home? Do we have the money to pay for all this? And finances, of course, is a huge concern today.
Because so
with
many
this.
people are out of work on account
Because a lot of
of
people
the
are out of work.
pandemic, just because so many businesses have had to be closed down.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people, but people are trying to learn. I think many are trying to be doing things that are health conscious. There are many who are not, and unfortunately, this is creating greater problems than we may have ever imagined, and in areas that we don't want to think about, whether it's in marital problems or child abuse, physical abuse. It's heightened.
Oh, yeah.
Suicidal thoughts or gestures are on the rise. Heavy use of alcohol and very serious drug use, ODs, we're reading about. And just for a start, a lot of those things are creating greater problems for people who can't imagine being able to cope with that. And for anybody who's lost their job, lost their income, maybe lost their health insurance without knowing what the future holds, that's a problem. That's a problem. I read something the other day that was shocking to me. I never even thought about. They said the incidence of measles, the incidence of stroke, just two medical matters, are on the decline.
Oh, okay.
And so the medical person said, help me understand this. How can they be on the decline? And they said because they're on the decline because they're not really on the decline. They're on the decline in numbers, but people with kids who may have ordinarily gone and gotten a measles shot or are not going to the doctor because they're afraid to go to the doctor, so they're not getting a measles shot. So what does that mean? I think some medical people might think, are we going to have a recurrence of even measles?
Oh.
And with strokes, they're saying for many people who have a stroke, they may not even know that themselves.
They may not recognize the symptoms.
They may not recognize themselves, and
them.
ordinarily, my understanding is that another person, be it a medical person or your own spouse, a child, somebody, friend will recognize that in you and persuade you to see the doctor. Well, a lot of people are not doing that, so people, for all we know, are having strokes, but they're not going to the doctor because they're afraid to leave their home.
Oh, yeah, because sometimes it's what they call a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, where it's a stroke, but it's a mild one, and the symptoms sort of pass after a while, but they really should be seen.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I'm wondering if this might be a symptom of OCD. I've been seeing so many cartoons in the newspaper about it too. It's this hoarding behavior that's going on with people these days, because ever since they heard about this pandemic,
Yes.
they're people, especially toilet paper. I've seen some really funny cartoons about this thing that's going on with the toilet paper these days. Like there was one cartoon where the man got his $1,200 from the government, you know, that everybody is supposed to get. And his wife is going, here he is with the car, and the car is literally overflowing with toilet paper rolls. And his wife said, "You got $1,200 from the government, and you spent all of it on toilet paper." She goes, you know, he spent $1,200 on toilet paper. And there was another one at Easter time with the Easter bunny, and the guy's got his hands around the neck of the Easter bunny, and like he's getting ready to strangle the Easter bunny, and he's going, "You can keep your eggs. Have you got any toilet paper?" You know, and stuff like that.
Sick humor.
And it's not just the toilet paper. I remember just this one week, all of a sudden, it didn't seem like we'd been hearing about the pandemic too long. And this one week, I had heard it like on a Thursday on the radio, them saying that people had been leaving stores with glacier-sized piles of toilet paper they'd bought. And I'm thinking, oh, that's nothing that's going to happen around here, you know. But we just happened to be needing to buy toilet paper, so I went in the grocery store. It was on a Saturday after I had been here to do a program, and I went in, and I did see that the toilet paper aisle was less well stocked than it usually was, and there was only one package of my preferred toilet paper brand, and somebody had stuffed it behind all of these packages of another brand, like they were hiding it and intending to come back later to get it. Well, of course I bought it because we were needing it, and then we kept hearing more and more about it as the week went on about the toilet paper situation. So the following week, when I was going to go to the store again, my husband told me, "Well, you better pick up another package before it's all gone." You know, these were like packages of 12. You better. So I went in there, and there was not a single roll of toilet paper in the grocery store. So somebody in the store said to me, well, the last they had heard was the Lighthouse Point grocery store was the only one in town that had any. So I decided to go over there. And they had exactly 2 individually wrapped rolls of toilet paper.
Jeez.
I bought those. And I had to drive past the Mayville Dollar General store in order to go home. So I decided I'd stop in there, you know, just to see if they had some. And they did, but not a huge, not as big of an amount as they would normally have. And I bought one package of 12 rolls in there and took it home. But anyway, when I was paying for it at the checkout counter, I said, you know, you're the only store in Mayville that has any toilet paper. I said to the girl at the cash register, and she goes, well, I'll be really mad at you if you tell anybody. She says, the only reason we have any at all was because we got a delivery of merchandise today. Oh. And it wasn't, and even now I think it's what they're restocking with, from the looks of things, must be the amount they just normally bring, because it's never, the section in the store is never filled up. But you know, you're hearing it about hand wipes and even flour. I finally got some whole wheat flour over the last couple of weeks after not having seen any whole wheat flour for 2 months.
I think, well, real quick, I think with the flour, I think part of what's going on, we talk about dietary changes. I think there are some people who, because who are trying new things out, like, gee, because instead of buying bread and realizing we've got to save money, maybe they're trying to bake bread. I think more people are buying bread bakers, machines, or are just doing it to try it. It's in the long run, for any of us who have done it, I've done that even for a living, baking bread. It's cheaper. It takes time, but if you're home,
you have
that time, for a few hours. It's a great thing to teach your daughters and sons to do, and a lot of people are doing that because maybe they're going to the store and there's no bread even, or the bread that they won't prefer may not be there. So I think that's a big plus, a change, and we'll see how long that lasts. People go back to work. That part that you asked earlier about OCD, I think for true hoarders, real true hoarders, where it really is a OCD factor, it does factor into it. And it is. We see that sometimes on TV. I've viewed that a couple of times where they've gone into homes. And,
I remember having seen some episodes of hoarding buried alive.
But I think for people who are collecting a lot of going out, and that's a different form, I think, of anxiety. I think is a sense of, I'm not sure that really falls in line with OCD, but who's to know how many of those people might be thinking that they need to because of the situation, because it's a great fear. It's a fear of the future, and so we need to, and the basics, and toilet paper obviously is a basic item, just like bread or milk or whatever else. And I think people are trying to find ways to make their money stretch, so to speak, whether it's baking bread or making pastries or cookies at home. A nice thing to do with the young kids or older kids. Who doesn't like a cookie that comes out of warm, and kids like that. And you keep them busy, give them a treat once in a while, but I think but as far as OCD, I don't think it probably is.
Probably not.
Probably not.
I just wondered. You think that people have just gotten scared,
I think,
and that's why they're doing it.
Yeah, and this pandemic, because of what we're hearing from the scientists, is that we don't see it. They don't see the virus. They see it under a microscope when they take a swab, or whatever it might be, the test, if you are able to even have a test. But a virus is something you don't see. You don't see that. And like we breathe oxygen, but we don't see oxygen molecules. We don't see that. And so, the one thing that we really respond to is fear. And with fear, people sometimes do things that they ordinarily might not do. Whether it's going out shopping and buying, great amounts of different types of items, food items that ordinarily they may not have to stock up.
I remember at one time, it's gotten better, but in the beginning, there was hardly any fresh produce. People were really going nuts with the fresh produce even.
Yeah.
You'd go in the store and there was hardly anything there in the fresh produce aisle to buy. So now there's another, I've noticed some careless behavior too. Behavior that, kind of just, is practically not nice, and it's like shortly after there started being the restrictions, maybe a month and a half ago, late March, early April, my husband and I decided we were going to go down to Wegmans to get all of the, we better get down there and get some of the things that are not sold in Mayville, because we don't have a big supermarket like that. And I mean, there's just certain things you can't find in town in Mayville. So we went down and we went in and did our shopping. There had been a car parked next to our car on the one side, and on the other side was the cart corral. And we did our shopping, and then we came back out of the store. And the car that had been next to ours was gone, and there were 2 pairs of the disposable type medical gloves laying on the pavement where the car had been. So it looked like those people had worn the gloves to protect themselves while they were doing their grocery shopping, and then taken them off and tossed them down on the pavement instead of putting them in a trash bag or something in the car. And somehow that seemed very inconsiderate of people. Somebody's going to have to pick those things up. Somebody who works at Wegmans was going to have to pick them up. And a couple of various other people that I've mentioned the incident to have said that situations like this can bring out the best in people, but it seems to bring out the worst in people too. And I mentioned this on one other episode when I was interviewing Diane and Bill from the Greystone Nature Preserve, and I remember Bill saying, oh, those are probably some of the same people that empty their cars' ashtrays in the parking lots.
Yeah, I know.
So I think that people, those of you in the viewing audience, really, if you're going to wear gloves in the store, at least have a trash bag in your car or something, you know, that you can put them in instead of throwing them down on the pavement.
Well, you know, it's interesting, and maybe I'm expanding it too much, but we suddenly use the word, maybe overused, but using the word heroes. You know, heroes years ago used to be just almost exclusive for maybe
people that went to war.
Yeah, soldiers and such.
Yeah,
did something heroic.
Or maybe saved a person's life
Right.
some other way or
Right.
something,
And today, the label is being attached to all kinds of medical people who are attending to the severely ill, dealing with death and dying, you know, EMTs, paramedics, fire company, police, they're all heroes. But suddenly it's everybody. And perhaps in some ways, hero may not be the best word to describe them. But everybody, I think, deserves to be treated with respect.
Right.
I have a client who, when she speaks to me, she says at some point in the session, and I hope the kindness that I see continues and prevails afterwards. But when we're thinking, but hopefully we're beginning to think about other people who sometimes we might not even do more than take for granted. And to just say thank you. So like if say you're in Wegmans, the man or woman who is going outside in different kinds of weather to pick up the shopping carts, to say thank you. Or the people who are picking up those gloves, cigarette butts, and a host of other kind of garbage that could easily have been tossed in their car and tossed in the garbage at home, or they're in a trash receptacle, to say thank you. Although just to appreciate people for who they are.
Yeah, I remember when I worked for the Resource Center, we were taught how to take the disposable gloves off properly. It's like with the one gloved hand, you would pull the one glove off, and then you'd stick your finger inside the other glove and pull it down over the rest of that first glove, so you're not touching the outside of the gloves. And before, you know, and then you throw them in the trash. Now, if people would do that, you know, they wouldn't have to think they've got to throw it on the pavement, that it would be inside out, so there wouldn't be, the germs probably wouldn't be inside, and they could have like just a bag of some sort in the car that they could throw them in when they open the car door.
Yeah, I don't. It's a tough question to answer without sounding overly judgmental and wondering if somehow some people's priorities may not be with taking care of their own stuff, including their own garbage, and being thankful for the fact that they can do that rather than leaving it to somebody else to take care of their dirty job. And it's not only what they do, it's what they teach. For those who have children, you know, what are you teaching your children and such? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that was just an example of something, a way that something should not be done anyways,
Oh, yeah.
you know.
Well, let me give, and just if I might throw in this, I've been talking about it a lot lately. Yeah, with the controversy, and it is controversial, unfortunately, of those who are not wearing masks and thinking the COVID-19 is a hoax and it's nothing more than a flu, and a host of other rationalizations that the scientists, I think, predominantly say no. It is something real. And I remember I was in a Tops in Randolph some weeks ago, visiting a friend and getting some groceries for him. And I got in line wearing a mask. People at the register were wearing masks, and there was a couple of people behind me, and one person said, I could overhear him saying to a friend that he had been in Wegmans and they kicked him out. That was his words. They kicked me out. And I didn't respond, but I thought I'd just listen. And he said that he wasn't wearing a mask. When you walk into Wegmans, there's a clear sign that requires that people wear a mask and then use a hand sanitizer. I'm wondering what happens if, so when I went in Wegmans the next time, I looked around and I'm not sure if I did see anybody. So I'm not sure from the legal standpoint or ethical or moral standpoint, what's the right thing to do? Can they say, you can't shop here because you're jeopardizing other people by not wearing a mask? Or, well, you don't have to, but I'd rather you did, but that's, so, and it's causing a lot of rift, it's causing a lot of conflict, and sometimes people are shouting at each other. And
Yeah. Are you planning on writing any newspaper articles? You do write those newspaper articles,
Yes.
so I was just wondering if you were going to address this issue in any.
I have already. I just finished one series of one, yes.
Okay, so I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
then.
I'm not sure when
it's
they're going to
brand
be
new,
published.
and I
Yeah, it'll be published.
haven't seen it yet.
Well, I can say a little bit about it, though, because I think it's becoming commonplace, and it's going to be more commonplace. Because a lot of the, I always smile when people who may not know about New York State, and they think New York City is the entire New York State, without realizing that when somebody will ask me a question, well, aren't you in New York? And I'll say, well, it takes me about 8 hours and 400 miles
Right, exactly.
to drive to New York City
Yeah.
if I did that.
Yeah, really.
Less by plane or such.
Really.
But the problem is that we have people spread all over our country, never mind just New York State. And so what happens if you have somebody, say you have a relative in one state who is elderly and ill, is brought to the hospital, and you hear about it, but you can't go, and you can't see him or her in person, and you're sitting, years ago they used to call it on pins and needles,
Oh, yeah.
anxiety prevailing, wondering how is my loved one doing, and you're at a distance. And what happens if you're saying, hey, you know what, I want, ordinarily you get a call, for many, you just get in your car or whatever and say, I'm going to be there in a hurry. It happened. And I remember years ago, my dad, we found out he was passing from home with hospice, and my brother and I came from different sectors of the country, flew there and got there right before he passed.
Oh.
And that really helped us with our grief.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
For people who might be in a position today where they're hearing that and they're told, don't come to the hospital. You can't come to the hospital. Or can you get on a plane and fly, and where are you going to stay? What if the family says that might be there even, nearby says, no, we're quarantining and we love you, but we don't want you to be here. Or we'll be taking our chances. Or maybe there's not a hotel, a motel, or any place that they can, Airbnb, they can stay. So that's kind of part of my article, and now I think a lot of people are already probably having loved ones who are, 100 miles, thousands of miles maybe away, but they can't see them at all, or talk to them on the phone. How do you deal with your grief?
Yeah. Now, what do you think was going on with that doctor in China who figured it out and was told not to make it public? What was that all about? They didn't.
Well, the little that I've read about that, I think that is so controversial right now. For I think the pundits, I think there are many who believe, one sector of our population believe that China unto itself is a very secretive country.
Mm-hmm.
Their leaders keep things close to the vest.
Mm-hmm.
They share only what they want to share. And I think they instill that heavily on their population, which for some, that may not go over very well. And maybe there's consequences for it. It's sad, it's beyond sad, it's tragic to think that a professional medical individual might have actually realized, oh my God, this is something that could cause destruction, death and destruction, far-reaching.
Right.
But for whatever reason, somebody or somebody's stopped him from doing that.
Well, what I do know is that he was arrested for making it public, and then he wound up coming down with it, and he died.
Yeah, and that adds to the tragedy. And what that has created is a rift of a debate of where did this virus come from, who's to blame, because we live in a world where, for some of us, rather than saying, well, maybe I'm part of the problem, but it's your problem, and finger pointing. And so when we have politicians or others who might be saying, this pandemic is because of China, unfortunately what has happened is, as a consequence, there are many people in our country, maybe even other countries around the world, who are from the Far East, and they may be Chinese people, they may be in here, there's people who are of Chinese American descent, or maybe they're in other countries, and who are catching a backlash, be it physical, some are being beaten, or being shunned, and really there's a growing prejudice. For whatever happened, and whatever we may have realized, if the true source was from China, remember the billions of people who live there probably have nothing to do with all of this.
Of course not. Of course not.
They want to live their lives like we do. They just happen to be living there. We live here. And to blame somebody, one person, and create and expand that to a whole society, and cause harm to people, rather than saying, hey, we share in this global problem. It's not just a problem just for our little sector of the world. I think people have to be cautious about being prejudiced and be presumptive to think that somebody is to blame for this.
Yeah. Now I've been hearing that animals have been coming down with it. There was, you've probably heard about the tiger at the Bronx Zoo.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And more recently, there was a couple of house cats that were living, part of the family, where there were some family members that had it, and the cats came down with it. I've heard reports of 2 house cats and 2 dogs. And in the beginning, they were saying that dogs couldn't get it, but now I've heard of 2 different cases of dogs that have come down with it. Had you heard about those?
I didn't hear about the dogs. I heard about the tiger. Yeah, but I think what that really speaks loudly of is
it's not species specific.
The unknown. I think when some people want to believe that they can say definitively this is the situation, and then hope that everybody who believes in that person runs with that as a truism. What I think the scientists are trying to say, and I believe, is that they're still learning about this virus.
Yeah.
In the beginning, they were saying that it was only going to be hitting the elderly and not children until people in their 30s and 40s. Now kids are getting it.
Now Governor Cuomo has been saying in recent days that little, very small children have been coming down with symptoms that are like Kawasaki's disease and toxic shock syndrome that they think might be somehow connected to the COVID-19 pandemic. So.
Yeah, and I think the misfortune from my perspective on a global level is that we have a wonderful opportunity, and I hardly use the word wonderful, but we have a wonderful opportunity to globally work together. Okay, remember we all live on the planet. When we say, I love when people will say God bless America. I'm wondering if anybody ever says God bless America, God bless every country, God bless the planet. Because we all share in one thing, definitely. We all are members of a planet called Earth.
Right.
And we all have
We're all members of the human family.
That's right, and we all have a responsibility to work together. And if all the scientists, if all the doctors, if all the people involved in this pandemic were freely able to work together, how wonderful it would be. I liken, although it's Hollywood, I liken to a movie I saw I really liked called a few years ago called The Martian. And for
The Martian?
The Martian, yeah. And this man, it's just a story about a astronaut who by accident is thought to be dead, where a group of astronauts from the Earth goes to Mars to discover Mars, and something happens and they think he's dead. Well, he's still alive. And it's his story of survival. And part of the story, I try not to give too much away at the end, which I thought was great, was when other countries, particularly China, who was in this movie is working on their own very secretive, program, connects with the Americans to work together in conjunction with that whole program to rescue, find a way to rescue this man who was left on Mars.
Okay.
And even though it's, sure, we can say it's a Hollywood fantasy, I like that part especially, not just that he was hailed a hero and rescued, but to me, more importantly, that these two countries could come together with for the common good. We have an opportunity now for all of us, no matter what our prejudices are, we all have them, to work together, and as my client said, to learn to be kind, to be able to say thank you, to be grateful for the little things, whether it's the person who picks up some of our trash that somebody may throw inadvertently or maybe purposely, or anything else. Everybody is working together for the common good.
Right. Well, before we close, I want to mention really quick a couple of things on a positive note. It has been the fact that people have been staying home and this and that and the other thing, it's actually been benefiting the environment because the air has been becoming less polluted.
Yes.
They were talking about how in India the smog has been clearing up, and the people in, what city was it? They could see blue skies for the first time in a long time. And the other positive thing I wanted to mention is the majority of the people who get COVID-19 recover from it.
Yes.
The majority of them do not die from it. So, I mean, I feel bad for the ones that don't make it and their families, but at least most of them do recover. So I want to thank you for coming on today. Could I say that was very courageous of you for coming into the studio? But anyways, I really appreciate it, and So we've tossed out some ideas for people.
Yeah.
And
Hope it can be helpful.
yeah, me too. And we've come to the end of another episode of Fresh Perspectives, and I'll see the rest of you in the viewing audience on the next episode in a couple of weeks.